I am ready whenever you are.
Okay. Three, two, one, go.
Hello, we are the Korean Brothers, and this is the Korean Brother Podcast. Okay, I am Aiden Yang.
And I am Brian Kim.
Okay, so this podcast was introduced to explore the deeper meanings of life, and today we are sitting here to discuss the contrasts of fate and free will.
Indeed, indeed. Throughout the books we've read in our AP literature class, I can think of so many examples of where the characters ultimately end in a downfall.
Regardless of their endings, the outcome of many novels we read spark a debate. Do characters lead themselves to a destiny through free will, or is it purely by fate?
As we can see in many works, ranging from novels to shows, the theme of fate versus free will serves as a type of lens, a lens where we can see characters navigating their destinies. And, well, this reveals the interactions between external forces and individual choices, ultimately shaping the narrative and conveying deeper insights into those characters.
Very true, Brian. And very deep. Okay. So the theme is more common than you think. Let's just delve into our everyday lives and see how apparent this theme shows.
Okay, so let's start off with a book we all read, Oedipus.
Mm,
Well, it's more of a play, I guess,
yeah.
but the tragic story of Oedipus and how he succumbed to his fate no matter what he tried to do to stop it.
Ah, yes. The tragic story of Oedipus. In the story, Oedipus tried to prevent his fate, and then whether or not he knew how to do it. So it was starting from when his parents abandoned him to avoid their fate of death, to simply casting out the prophet when he was told his fate. A lot of instances occurred when Oedipus was told his fate, but simply tried to ignore it or try to prevent it.
Yeah. So fate always prevailed, and in the end, Oedipus suffered because of it.
Yep.
And we saw in the story, Oedipus wasn't the only one who suffered from fate. The people around him died due to it, such as the death of his parents, his friends, and even caused the suffering of his daughters.
And there wasn't a thing he could do, sadly. It seemed as if even when Oedipus tried to lead his own life and destiny, it was ultimately fate that controlled it.
A sharp contrast to the stranger and how Mersault lived, it seemed.
Speaking of Morceau, he didn't really live by fate, it seemed. He seemed to have a lot of free will, not really bound to fate like Oedipus was.
Mersault lived on his own convenience, didn't he?
Yeah, very much different from Oedipus, who more so lived in fear and freedom in his latter years, while Marceau lived happily, especially towards the end of The Stranger.
It seems as if they lived very different lives, and a lot of that seemed to have been because of fate or free will.
Marceau did what he found convenient. We can see that when he didn't really grieve for his mother, when he shot the Arabic, when he chose not to pursue God, and much more really.
Which is weird because he chose not to follow God even when that was his salvation. Mersault was given a chance to live through God, but he found that inconvenient and not based on his ideals.
And because of that, his views on life were very carefree and selfish. While originally it seemed like he mostly lived by societal norms, we can see that Marceau followed his own rules.
And we can see this affecting a lot of people around him, from his prosecutor to the priest to even his girlfriend. His way of living influenced a lot of people.
Just like Oedipus.
Yeah. And even if they lived two completely separate lives, one led by fate and the other one through free will, they both had an influence on other people and, in a way, influenced by others.
The journey they took really impacted a lot of people, man. Mostly negative, very negative. Yet they realized their true selves after the journey was over. Marceau was more ecstatic and happy, while Oedipus was more depressed and in sorrow.
Life is like a box of chocolates,
Mm.
but replace those chocolate with bean boozled beans. You never know what you're going to get. It might be good or it might be bad. You just have to try. It could have been your free will to try the candy, but it could have been fate for you to get it. Once you try it, the true flavor, the true essence, gets revealed and ultimately reveals the bean you tried.
Oh, that okay. That was the weirdest analogy, Ryan. But okay. So what I'm getting from you is that it's also about the journey that reveals the character's true and deeper self.
Exactly.
So just like the our favorite book that we read, The Alchemist,
Correcto.
Santiago Migo, living his life he truly wanted, following his dreams of become a wanderer, a shepherd, to even fulfill his personal legend. It takes serious dedication to do that, but I was always wondering something.
Like what?
Was it really his fate or his free will that led him to such a life?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because it was Maktub that he fulfilled his personal legend, but he took deliberate action to fulfill it.
Wait, before you continue, what does maktub mean?
It means it is written, everything is written for you to fulfill.
Oh yeah, maktub. I love that word. Okay, continue.
So, okay, so the wise man, the king of Salem, the dude called Melchizedek, I don't really know, said that not everyone fulfills their personal legend, and a personal legend is like 100% fate. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Well, he also said that a lot of people don't realize their fate, that they don't take deliberate action to fulfill their fate.
True, true.
So that means that the people who do realize their personal legends are using their free will, their conscious and deliberate actions to realize them, right?
Wait, so you're telling me that the alchemist is talking about both fate and free will? How are they both intertwined?
Yes, very much unlike the other two things we talked about earlier. Two completely opposite things coexisting.
Okay, okay. So basically the ending was fate oriented, but the journey there was based on free will.
Yeah, in a sense, yes.
And that allowed us to understand the characters even better because we were watching Santiago navigate his own destiny and in the process learn more about him.
Yeah, our connection with Santiago grew during this journey, and so did he with the rest of the characters around him. It was fate that drew him to his future wife, yet it was his free will that led him to leaving her to fulfill his personal legend.
And she approved of his leave. She even encouraged it because she knew that it was his fate to fulfill his personal legend. She didn't want him to regret not fulfilling his personal legend, and that was her free will.
And you know what's the amazing thing about that story is, Brian?
What?
It made me also believe that you should try rather than not try. You might regret it if you don't. Well, everything may not be fated, or maybe it is. It's your own actions that decide your life.
That's deep.
Thanks. Okay, let's take back from the literature world. There's a classic movie that was so deep both physically and figuratively. Get it, Brian? The tragic ending of the main character really does bring tears to my eyes.
The Titanic?
Yeah, you are correct.
Okay, okay. For those who haven't seen the film, Titanic, a 1912 British ship, was built to sail the Pacific Ocean and was thought to be unsinkable. Jack was like a little cocky adventurer and he
Hmm.
wanted to explore the world, while Rose, a woman who came from a rich family, was also on the ship. The two ran into each other, and despite their differences, they fell in love. Okay, so this is where the historical events come in. The iceberg crashes, and as they sink, their love goes stronger than ever. Ultimately, Jack has to make the ultimate sacrifice to let Rose
Yeah,
stay on the door so she stays afloat, and he dies.
it's a feel such a sad story. Jack's very first presence on the Titanic can be seen as a twist of fate as he wins a third class ticket in a poker game, the game that is famously symbolizing chance.
Yeah, and The different class divisions that separates the rich to the top of the deck and the poor to the bottom also plays an important role on who was able to escape the sinking first. Let's not forget the Titanic's poor structure before they even set sail.
Yeah.
I think Jack had absolutely no control over this.
A fateful tragedy indeed.
Yeah, I agree. But it also depends on the perspective of each character. For example, the Titanic's captain, Edward J. Smith, commanded his crew to steer left rather than steering right. Which theorists would have said, which theorists, this is so hard to say,
Unlucky.
which theorists would have said prevented the ship from crashing?
And how does that relate to our topic?
Well, through Smith's irrational decisions, his own free will ultimately ended in his own life being taken. Sure, it's not like he planted an iceberg or took part in building the ship, but perhaps it could have had a different result if his actions were different. Smith had plenty of time to change the ship's direction, slow down, or take other precautions. His decisions, whether influenced by external factors or not, had a direct impact on the fate of the Titanic and its passengers.
It's unique because to Jack, the captain's decision is an external force, whereas to the captain was influenced by his individual choice.
And this shows a deeper meaning towards the characters in the work, like how important a leader's decision can influence a series of events and its consequences.
Yep.
Wait, Aiden, as a Korean brother podcast, it would be a shame not to reference our own traditional culture.
That's right, the pinnacle of our economy, K-drama.
Yo, have you seen the new Netflix show Singles Inferno?
It's a dating show on Netflix, right?
Yeah, and it's really popular amongst not just Koreans, but Americans as well. The cast there literally gained to 1 million followers on Instagram after the show aired. So there's a group of men and women stranded on an island for 10 days, and they basically talk. And at the end of the 10 days, the people who select each other can leave the island together as a couple.
Eh, that's a very interesting concept.
One of the contestants really stood out to me. Her
Mhm.
name is Hazel Choi, and she left the island with a man named Guan Hee. The theme of fate and free will really is more common than I thought.
Was it love at first sight? Wouldn't that imply fate?
I think so. I mean, they were pretty attracted to each other from day one. So one could argue that they were always meant to be.
But let's not forget the selection process. In order for the couple to leave the island, they had to rely on their own decision.
One could say that the act of fate was encapsulated by the ultimate decision of free will, sort of like a verification process.
I guess it's the free will that made the final decision then.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. No matter how goofy these examples are, I
Yeah,
mean, we're literally talking about a dating show. It unveils something important. The beauty of love is that we get to choose our desires and our affections.
man.
Okay, so
Wait, Brian, I just remembered. We have an orchestra concert soon, and I haven't even practiced my music yet.
speaking of orchestra, I'm pretty sure there's a symphony piece called Fate.
Really?
Wow. It's an original piece called Beethoven's Symphony Number 5, but many people refer to Fate Symphony because the first four notes, da-na-na-na, is
Hmm.
said to resemble fate knocking at someone's door, and it's used as a motive throughout each movement of the work. As the symphony progresses, Beethoven introduces multiple themes and emotions. The buildup shows a struggle against the initial fate motive. This may be possibly be attempts to create one's own pattern and make choices that defy the predetermined paths. This mirrors the tension between external forces and individual choices in literature. This is shown through the various dynamics of the music, from the quiet strings to the exploding brass.
Man, I love that symphony. There are four movements. A movement of a symphony or a concerto are like the chapters in a book. A composer uses them to organize and contrast the themes and ideas in a longer piece of music. The final movement of Symphony Number 5 can be interpreted as a resolution to the struggle. Beethoven transforms this initial fate motif into a whole different theme, hinting free will may have ultimately beat the so called fate motif.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. That sounds so deep.
Yup. You know how we mentioned how these themes aren't just visible through literary works? We showed alternative examples like movies and TV shows, but this one takes it to a whole new level. The mention of fate and free will doesn't necessarily have to be a physical presence in a character. A melody like this music can perfectly incorporate the meaning of the themes without explaining anything. Wow. We surely went through a hell of a fate slash free will roller coaster. I feel like we were watching one of those compilation videos on YouTube.
Yeah, and we could still go on with more examples, but for time's sake, let's try to wrap things up about what we just discussed. A little briefing.
True. So, fate. Big concept with a lot of intricacies.
These themes and elements aren't just present throughout literature, it coexists within our everyday lives. We just don't realize it.
And within these themes, we can understand a deeper purpose for why fate or free will exists. Like the Titanic's representation about individual responsibility and their consequences, and Singles Inferno's showcase of the freedom to choose your own affection. All these can be discovered.
This was a great discussion today, Aiden. Well, thank you guys for listening to the Korean Brothers, and we'll see you guys very soon on our next episode.
Thank you. 고맙습니다.